Hey guys, it's Q here, creator of ICMIZER. Today I'll be recording a video where we will review 5 tournament hands. This video will be really helpful to players who are just beginning to use ICMIZER and aren't quite sure how they can apply the tool on their hands. In this video I assume that you have watched the tutorial video, but you still have some questions about the exact process of entering a hand in ICMIZER and reviewing it. I'll be reviewing 5 hands, which will look like hands which you can find in some poker forums like 2+2 or others, and I'll be entering the hands manually. I'm not importing the hands as text, just so you can see how easy it is to do. In reality, when you're analyzing your own hands, you can usually paste hands in ICMIZER. You don't have to enter the stacks by hand. So let's get started. In the first hand, the blinds are 150. There are 6 players, and hero is on the button. Everybody folds to hero. He has king queen suited. He raises 2 blinds because big blind has 16 blinds or 17, and hero is not sure he should be pushing in this hand, so he chooses to raise. But the big blind pushes now, and hero is wondering what to do. So how we should review this hand in ICMIZER? First of all, let's choose the right tournament. This is the 9 max tournament. Now we are entering stacks. You can see that I'm tabbing through stacks, and the process is really fast and easy. Hero is on the button, we raise 200, and big blind pushes. Now let's see quickly the result. The hero hand is king queen suited. It is selected already. We can see that if big blind pushes 10%, then we should be folding. Let's see what happens if he pushes 30%. Now, if a big blind pushes 30%, we can see that king queen is the call. So if he pushes 10, it's a fold. If he pushes 30, it's a call. So what should we do? How do we know how wide he pushes? Well, I hope that you have some knowledge about your player on the big blind. You have played a few hands and you can see his stats, etc. But let's be realistic and think, how wide can he push? He probably isn't pushing junk like this. Well, depends on the stakes you're playing. I'm assuming you're not playing too high, otherwise you probably know how to use ICMIZER already. Or it's very natural for you to guess what's the process of assigning a range for your opponent. I'm removing some hands which I think he is not pushing at this level into our min raise. Well, let's say he is aggressive and he pushes some suited strong hands, so 22%. Let's hit calculate. Okay, we can see that at this point it becomes slightly less than 0, very close. So what you have to do is think, is your opponent more tight than this or more aggressive than this? In some cases he could be really aggressive, like this. Who knows? And then, as we have seen before, it becomes a very profitable push. With 0.77, it's a lot of money at stake, so you should be calling. But in reality, I think against many tighter opponents, it's a very easy fold. You can see how expensive a mistake would be. So this is the first and easy hand. The second hand, there are 3 players. The blinds are 600, 300. And I assume the tournament is different, but let's see. I'm changing number of players to 3, and I'm assigning ranges. Stacks, sorry. I'm choosing the correct blind structure. Made a couple of mistakes. Okay, so we can see that the total sum of chips is 15,000. So I'm guessing this is some kind of 5 max tournament or so. So I'll be using 6 max payout structure, where first place is getting 65% of the prize pool. This is similar to PokerStars 6 max structure. So let's see what's going on here. Again, hero has king queen suited and button pushes before us. And we are wondering, should we call as a short stack or should we fold? And in this case, it's really important to use the FGS model because we are rather short stacked, everybody has very few blinds, and FGS plays an important role. The first thing we should do is calculate the Nash equilibrium for button push. We are calculating the equilibrium, and we can see that if he's playing according to equilibrium, he is pushing 39% of hands, and our calling range would be 11%. When we hit calculate, we can see that king queen suited is a very profitable call for us. As a short stack with future games simulations, we can see that against this kind of pushing range, we have to call. But let's say your opponent is a little bit tight. At which point do you think it becomes negative for us to call? Let's adjust his range a little bit. It was 39 before, now let's make it 33. And we can see that king queen suited becomes negative. So if your opponent is playing reasonably, it's an easy call. If he is a little tighter, well, it's probably a call, because if it's so close to zero, I would probably call, because it's likely that he's a little bit tighter than this. Well, it all depends on the big blind too. If, for example, big blind is calling very wide, then the button knows that, and he probably isn't pushing so wide. For example, if a big blind is some player who is not aware of ICM, he may call with 20% versus button push. And here where this range is the big blind's calling range versus button push range when we fold. The overcall range here is when we call, how wide he will overcall. Of course, he won't overcall wide. He will probably limit himself to the strongest of hands. Something like this. Tops, right? But if he is very aggressive with call versus button for some reason, maybe he's tired, then we can see that our results for king queen would be very negative. This is important. Even if we improve his pushing range, we will see that it probably doesn't change much for us. Well, it does change, but since we have improved the big blind's calling range, it's now more profitable for us to fold king queen suited. So these are the things which you should think about in this kind of spot, like when and how wide you have to be depending on your opponent ranges. If he's very wide, for example, he's pushing 60%, and this guy is reasonable against his push, for example. He's not very, well, looking forward to call him with a7. Well, maybe he is, but not. Well, 11% is rather tight against this kind of aggressive player. We will see that king queen suited is very profitable, and we should jump fist pump call, basically. And let's see what happens for the big blind from his perspective. How wide does he have to call if the button is so aggressive and we call correctly against his push? Well, maybe a little tighter without some extremely weak hands like this. You can see that we can call pretty wide also. Well, generally, why this happens. While this guy has a tight range, he has a very short stack. And this guy has a very wide range. So the side pot for us against this guy is very big. So we can be pretty wide. This is a little surprising for some players. So this is the second hand. And now we go to the third hand where we are again 3 players. Here is the big blind. And small blind raises 400. And here is thinking what to do. Let's copy stacks. I'm copy pasting no stacks just for fun. The blinds are 100, 200 with antes. I reset bets. Here is on the big blind and the small blind min raises. Note that in ICMIZER currently the min raise looks like this. The action column should represent the entire amount of chips which player has bet before hero. So he bet the ante and he raises. We display the raise size as 425 because it's the sum of all chips which he has paid. Now this range is his raising range. Let's say that he's raising, well, let's start with something. He's raising 40%. We change to tournament back because we can see that the chip sum is 13,500, and so this is a 9 max tournament. I'll turn off FJS because here everybody is very deep stacks. It doesn't play such a big role right now. And well, first of all, let's think how wide exactly is the small blind raising. Well, if he is good, he could be wider than this. But well, let's say he's reasonable with some kind of hands. I don't know, something like this, 50%, trying to pressure us. Well, and let's say that when we push, here is his calling range when we push. So here is his raising range, 50%. And here we are choosing hands which he will call our all-in with out of the range which he raised us. So usually it's important when you raise to call with a reasonable percentage of your raising range. Otherwise, it becomes very profitable to push on you with literally any hand. So if he calls us with 13%, which if you divide 50 by 13 is only 25% of the time, we will see that, well, as I told you, he's not calling wide enough, so everything is a push. He's just raise folding too much. As we improve his calling range, oh, and our hand is a7 offsuit, just so we follow the hand precisely. It doesn't change much for the results because the results display all hands. So as we can see, I have improved his calling range now. It's closer to half of the time he folds and half of the time he calls us. We can see we cannot push so wide as we could before. Well, let's say that we push like this. How wide should he call? What do we think about this 22% range? How we can edit it? We can put ourselves on his position and we can make it look as if we are him on the small blind we raised and the big blind pushes with this range. And now we can check how wide can we call. You can see that we can call with 29% against 44 range. We get back and we hit calculate and we can see that we can now push 25%. Now ICMIZER allows you to calculate Nash equilibrium for this kind of spot where the small blind raises. And let's find this is a special case where you get to choose from two options. The option one is to find the optimal steal range for the small blind. The second option is to find optimal hero pushing range and small blind calling range if we keep the current small blind range. So the current small blind range is 50% raise. Let's say we keep it and we find the optimal hero and small blind ranges. So we can see that in this case, if he raises 50%, hero can push 38% of hands and small blind can call 23% of hands. And of course, A7 shows a strong positive result in this kind of range where it is, well, very strong compared to other plus EV hands, which are very weak. Another thing we can do here is find the optimal small blind stealing range. And this would be different. It will take a little more time, but ICMIZER will go through potential various options for small blind and find the range which shows the most profit, like how wide he should be min raising for this to be game theory optimal strategy of a min raise. And we can see that it would be 62%, hero would be pushing 41%, and the small blind would be calling 28%. And again, a7 is very strong hand. Almost 1% of total prize pool is huge. Let's see when it becomes negative. If we limit his raising range for something like as if he's very weak, afraid of us, doesn't want to play against us on the big blind, because he know, well, maybe we play better on the post flop and we will call. Maybe he tries to limit his raising range to 35%. And of course he won't be calling so wide because he knows that we know that he is tight. So we won't be smashing too much on him. Let's say he calls like this. Again, I didn't make him call often enough. It's just that he folds too much still. Let's see how wide he should call us and how wide we should push if we keep his range at 35%. We can see that we can now push 29% and he should call 16%. And again, a7 is a plus EV hand, but it's much closer to 0 than it was before. Okay, third hand is taking us too much time. I'm moving to the fourth hand. The blinds are, 25, 50. There are 7 players. Let's enter stacks again. Maybe I'll be faster just by typing. Okay, the blinds are 50, 25. Hero raises to 125. And the MP raises to 375. And everybody folds the hero. So hero raises from under the gun, so it is obvious that we are rather tight and we have 8s in this hand. So the MP knows this, but he chooses to raise 1/3 of his stack almost. So how wide is he? Well, he probably doesn't have some junky hands like 6s. So he's probably very tight. So this may look reasonable. Probably when somebody makes a raise of 1/3 of their stack, they probably are not doing that with 7s or 8s. They probably are very tight in this case, and probably even not doing this with aces unpaired, because when the flop comes, it's not very comfortable, and we are in position. If he misses, he may not like what happens, because we may push on the flop and he will have to fold or call. Generally, they will try to simplify the situation. So I think that the player would be pretty tight in this spot, and maybe I'm a little bit too kind with this range. But let's say it's 5%. And, well, when we push, obviously he's not folding, right? He has the odds to call. So he will call with entire range. He won't fold 9s, he won't fold anything. So let's just hit calculate. Again, we can see that this is a 9-max tournament. The payout structure is correct. We can simply hit calculate and see what we should do with 8s now after we raise and he re-raises. We can see that 8s is a very negative hand in this case. It's clear fold. And let's see how wide does he have to be for it to be called. Well, since his range doesn't even start at 8s, it should be obvious that since we have only invested a small part of our stack, we should be folding. It's like natural thought. But let's see if it does have some weaker hands. A little bit. Is it a push? Well, he is not folding, so he is basically committing himself. Let's see. Okay, I was quite lucky, and basically I found the range where 8s become plus EV. But you can guess that in reality he is not doing this wide, so 8s are a fold. And as we get back to 5% range, something like this, let's see what hands we can use. Well, we can use only 3% of hands, jacks plus and ace king. And we get to the last hand where blinds are 200, 100, and there are 6 players. I'm entering the stacks as usual. Hero is on the big blind, and in these hands there are 2 pushes before hero. The cutoff pushes, and the small blind calls that and pushes over the top. And the blinds are 100, 200. And hero is on the big blind. In this case, we should start with FGS calculation. And we can, Nash equilibrium ranges calculation for this spot. And we can use FGS because everybody is rather short stacked. And once we find the equilibrium, we will know how wide the cutoff should be pushing, and the small blind calling that push. And by calling in ICMIZER, we basically mean pushing, because if you don't fold in ICMIZER, your action is always all in. So we can see that, well, we have, in this hand, we have 8s. We can see that the optimal play for them would be pushing 24% for the cutoff, and for the small blind it would be calling with 13%. And let's see how we can call this. We can see that if they are playing according to Nash equilibrium strategy, which is probably quite aggressive, 8s are very negative to call. So why is that? We have a pretty strong pre-flop hand. But in this case, it's important to see that the players before us are so tight. I haven't changed the payout structure. The sum is 15,000, so maybe it's a 50 tournament. So I'm analyzing it as if it's a 9 max tournament. So 8s is a fold. Let's say that it's a 50-50 tournament. And now we calculate how the players should be playing in 50-50 tournament. And in 50-50, the 6 players left would be a bubble of tournament. We can see that the push is a little bit tighter, but our call is a little bit wider. So 8s is basically, well, 0, pretty much close to 0. But probably at 50-50 tournament you don't want to call, because it's so likely that tournament ends right now. You don't want to take this risk. Let's think, how wide does he have to be for 8s to be positive? I'm turning off FGS and I'll be using the charts feature. And charts allow us to plot the hero hand's equity versus opponent potential ranges. So let's say we are wondering, let's fix the small blind calling range at 12%, and let's wonder at what point 8s become plus EV in regards of cutoff push range. So I have calculated this, and we can see that for 8s to become plus EV, the cutoff should be pushing, well, wider than 17%. Then it becomes pretty plus EV. Note that in current version ICMIZER doesn't allow to use FGS with the charts. This will be fixed in upcoming version. And ICMIZER 2 is also coming very soon, so everything will look differently. So, as you can see, without FGS, 8s become worse than with FGS taken into account. So, we have reviewed 5 hands. The video is longer than I would like it to be, but I hope it was helpful for you guys. And good luck using ICMIZER and improving your game. Please let me know if you would like some other video recorded, if you like this format. Thank you for watching. Bye.